Conference Championship Sunday in the National Football League is just 2 days away. It is time for Mike Blewett's Breakdown. We welcome you back to a Conference Championship Football Friday live right here on the early line. I'm Ben, he is Donnie, and there is Big Blue stepping into the middle and helping us break down the NFC title game first up in Santa Clara between the 49ers and the Lions, and then we'll get to the AFC Championship game in our second straight segment together in Baltimore between the Ravens and the Chiefs. Blue, as always, we appreciate the time on a Football Friday.
We got tremendous football last week. Excited for some more. Two great games, teams that we absolutely expected could be in this position. And if we're knocking out 50 million viewers in a divisional weekend, I think we're going to exceed that. Two great games. Excited to talk about them right here.
So, Blue, 10 playoff games so far during this 2023 NFL postseason. Only 2 have featured the spread coming into play, where a favorite has won and not covered, or an underdog has not won outright. And that includes 2 games that feature both of the teams that will play in the NFC Championship game on Sunday night in Santa Clara. The Lions opening weekend, super wild card weekend against the Rams, a 3-point home favorite. They won by only a single point. Last week, the Niners, a 9.5-point favorite at home against Green Bay. They beat the Packers by only 3. It's a 7.5-point spread on Sunday night in Santa Clara in the NFC Championship game. The over-under, 51.5. So, Blue, we've only seen 2 games this postseason where the spread is actually factored into the equation. Will it be maybe for a third time on Sunday in Santa Clara?
It certainly feels that way right now. I think we have seen Detroit play a couple of hard-fought games. They were not able to put away the Rams in the way that some people expected, but I think people appreciate that the Lions are this hard-fought team, earning every inch of their playoff journey, and they have to go on the road now. It's all the same questions we've had about Jared Goff for the last 2 years. Can he get it done on the road? Can this team travel to San Francisco in a game where weather won't be a factor? Can they travel out there and bring some of what the magic that they've had in Detroit, can they bring it to San Francisco? And on the flip side, I think there's legitimate concerns about Brock Purdy after last week. Now, weather, again, will be in his favor. Won't be raining, won't have to be throwing gloves on and gloves off. But it certainly feels to me at this moment like we're going to have a tight game here. I think the 7.5 is a little too many for me. Do I think the Niners are the superior team from week 1 to week 19 or 20 that we're in right now? I do, but it doesn't mean that I think they're smashing teams. I think they needed huge turnovers late against the Packers in order to put it away. There are some real concerns about this Niners team being able to stay turnover-free on offense. Can Debo really bring his A game to the table? It looks like he's going to give it a go. But I think these are all the questions we're going to ask ourselves. And really, is this the type of game that does get into the 50s? I think that's what you're going to make your ultimate decision about. If you feel like these defenses are going to check each other early on in the game, then you're playing an under and you're playing the Lions.
Let's take a look at some of the comparisons in this game, because if we look at both of the offenses from my vantage point, Mike, they're elite here. Detroit's got a very good offense, so do the San Francisco 49ers. But it feels like this game is going to come down to that 49ers offense against the secondary of the Detroit Lions here. Talk to us about that part of the game plan, and also, is there a way that Detroit can say, we can slow this offense down here with a good pass rush?
I don't know that their pass rush is good enough to state what you just said. Aiden Hutchinson is obviously a player that is exploding into the NFL and building a great career early on. But between him and Opara and everybody else, can they put enough pressure on Purdy in order to stifle this offense? That is really what the Niners deal with very well, Donnie. They are able to get the ball out quickly. They're obviously able to switch it up with McCaffrey, create runs, create throws to McCaffrey, quick throws to Samuel and Kittle. Ayuk obviously is a big play guy for them. But to your point about the numbers, from a DVOA standpoint, efficiency of offense, they're both top 5. The Niners are first, Detroit 5. defensively, Detroit is the only team of these 4 teams playing this weekend that has any DVOA rankings outside of the top 10, their defense being 13th. I thought there was a little bit of credit given to the Lions secondary and their defense last week against Tampa. That was perhaps a little heavy-handed. It is still the weakest unit of any of these 4 teams, in my opinion, that is going to be on the field is this Lions pass defense. So it's going to be about accuracy for Purdy, them getting the ball out quickly, staying clean, and I think they'll be able to take advantage of it. Is it bombs away to Ayuk all day on Sunday? I don't think so, but I do have concerns about the Lions being able to slow down this Niners offense.
The Lions have allowed the last 5 passers they have played, those last 5 quarterbacks, to throw for at least 345 yards. Matthew Stafford, 367 in the Super Wildcard round. And, of course, last week, Baker Mayfield, 349. Detroit has won both of those games, of course, to appear in an NFC title game for the first time in 32 years. But it is the worst unit out there. The other 3 teams still playing on Conference Championship Sunday, the Ravens, Chiefs, Niners in that order. 3 best scoring defenses in the National Football League. The Lions give up a little bit more than 23 points per game. So we showed you the total, 51.5, a full touchdown ahead of where the total is in the AFC Championship game. That one's 44.5. This one's 51.5. Blue broke down those numbers for you. So now to the individuals in the quarterback comparison. Blewett, there are the narratives entering Conference Championship Sunday. Then there are the numbers. 274.5 for Brock Purdy, who was not great last week by any means. 23 of 39 for 252. In his NFC Championship game appearance last year in Philly, it was short-lived. Knocked out of the game early, did come back because the Niners had no other options at QB. Jared Goff has thrown for more than 255.5, at least 277 in both of the playoff games this year for Detroit. He returns to his native Northern California, albeit outdoors, on Sunday night in Santa Clara. Blewett, what do you expect out of the quarterbacks matching up in the NFC title game?
Yeah, like I've mentioned before, I think the real key is making sure that they stay clean throughout as much of the game as they can. Goff has been really good in the playoffs. Goff's been really good for most of the season. He's obviously throwing to an all-pro player in Amon-Ra St. Brown. The Niners have had some injuries over the course of the season to their secondary as well. It doesn't have the same challenges, I would say, as Detroit's secondary, and Detroit's secondary is dealing with more weapons. But I think they're going to need – I think this is going to be a case for Goff to utilize Laporta and Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown in the best way possible. I believe it's a total of 17 receptions between Gibbs and Laporta last week alone. So that is a big recipe for success for them. But keep in mind, you're going against a linebacker core in the Niners that will make it as hard for Sam Laporta as any team has made it this year. Drake Greenlaw and Fred Warner are going to give him a very hard time. I think it is extremely important that Goff continues to stay away from any interceptions. But what concerns me about that is, are they going to have to be too conservative? Will they then have to rely so heavily on the run game that it becomes Detroit having to run over the Niners, which is a task in and of itself that is a little bit too much. It's why I'm leaning towards the Niners winning this game. But again, I think the spread is a little too fat here. I just think that the Lions can keep this game close. I think it's lower scoring than the total implies. And I just think this leads to a Niners win, but it's really about how clean can he be in these pressure situations. If the Lions get out to a lead, which is going to be the key for them to win this game, if the Lions get out to a 10-point lead, say in the first half, that's the recipe for them winning. This is not a come-from-behind Lions victory.
The skills that pay the bills, a lot of really good skill position players in this game. Mike, if it's Christian McCaffrey in the backfield here for the San Francisco 49ers, is it Gibbs and Montgomery there for the Detroit Lions? Give me a player that you're focused on this week, maybe a prop perspective. Who do you think controls this game here from a skill perspective, Mike?
It's too easy to say Christian McCaffrey, but I think he's going to be the key for them winning this game. Donnie, we've talked about it all year. There's times when the Niners utilize Christian McCaffrey when we think they should be resting him. This is no time for that. I think he'll see a ton of touches, and they'll try to control the clock. And I think you're looking at Christian McCaffrey total props, so rushing and receiving. But on the Lions side, I think we've seen what it looks like now. We waited a long time for Jahmyr Gibbs. They eased him in. This is his time to be an explosive player. Amon-Ra St. Brown is their best skilled player, but I think Jahmyr Gibbs is the key to them winning this game. If this is a Lions victory on Sunday, I think we're going to be looking at, wow, look at this rookie running back and what he was able to do, catching the ball and running the ball. Not dissimilar to what he did the other day against Tampa, but I think he'll be the guy we're looking at, saying that he's the reason they won the game.
Those rookie pieces for Detroit have played a huge role in getting the Lions to their first conference championship game since the 1991 NFL season. The Lions have never played in the big game. That would be a Super Bowl. Trying to get a Super Bowl berth for the first time in franchise history. They made an NFL championship game way back in 1957, before the merger, before the Super Bowl even began. Of course, San Francisco was there in 2019. They faced off against the Chiefs in Super Bowl 54, came up short, but the fourth NFC title game appearance for the 49ers in the last 5 years. Now we go to the first game on Conference Championship Sunday, the AFC title game in Baltimore. Next. Conference Championship Sunday begins in the Charm City, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, the slated kick between the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs. A 3.5-point spread in favor of the Flock. The over-under is 44.5. Mike Blewett is back for a second consecutive segment on this Football Friday, live right here on the early line. Blue, we saw some movement throughout the week for the Lions and the 49ers in the NFC title game. A spread that opened at 6.5 early this week is now 7 in a hook in favor of San Francisco. The total was 50.5, up by a point as well, 51.5. The spread and the total has remained pretty consistent in the AFC Championship game between KC and Baltimore. 3.5 in favor of the Ravens, 44.5. How do you view the numbers for the AFC title game on Sunday?
So I think there's another opportunity here for the spread to come into play. It's a fascinating game on a lot of levels. It makes sense to me that there hasn't been a lot of movement because you have Lamar versus Mahomes. I don't think anybody I can see the books not wanting to be too leveraged against either quarterback, and people are going to have their opinions about both guys. What I keep coming back to is that the last 6 home games for Lamar, the Ravens have scored over 31 points each time out there. They've been very difficult to stop at home. The Ravens team total bets that we've been talking about for the last 3 months have been money. They've been very difficult to slow down.
Yeah.
Every question that the three of us have had about the Ravens, they've answered with authority every time. Offensive line, all right, rotation in there. They're doing a great job protecting Lamar. How's Lamar's health? Perfect. How's the defensive line? Putting a lot of pressure on people. What the Bills failed to do last week was get any pressure on Mahomes whatsoever. And I'm not suggesting that it's going to be a blitz-happy situation, but I do think they're going to make things a lot more difficult for Mahomes than certainly the Bills and other teams have had. So I'm leaning. I'm really in a position at this point where I find it hard. I won't be stunned at a Ravens loss, but I don't think the Ravens. I think the Ravens match up favorably. With every team left in the playoffs. I think a Ravens win happens here. It's just a matter of how tight can Mahomes keep this. The Chiefs' bugaboo this year has been really their lack of weapons. It's Kelsey and Pacheco, and no one else other than Rashee Rice has even really raised their hand to get involved. So if they can spread the ball out a little bit, I think that would be helpful to them. But with Marlon Humphrey getting healthier and Kyle Hamilton getting healthier, I do think it's a little bit too much of a challenge for the Chiefs here. So I expect a Ravens victory, and I think it's with Lamar being able to spread the ball around to these 4 number 1 draft picks that they have on their team at receiver.
Mike, 6 straight years the Kansas City Chiefs had appeared in the AFC Championship game, which is absolutely incredible. But as we know, the previous 5 all played at home in Arrowhead. I've been to 4 NFC Championship games between Veterans Stadium and Lincoln Financial Field. It's the Super Bowl for the home team. If the crowd is wild during the regular season and the early rounds in the playoffs, it's amplified in championship games. The AFC Championship game will be in Baltimore. How do we think that the Kansas City Chiefs will handle the pressure of being a road team in this championship environment?
It's a fair question. They handled it well last week, though, and the conditions weren't great. I think that they should expect every fan base's best game, right? That's what Mahomes is. That's the legacy that Mahomes is building for himself. But 46 degrees, a little rain, I think that's about what you would expect in Baltimore. I don't think it'll drastically impact the game either way. And given that the Chiefs are an outdoor team, have played games in frigid weather recently, I don't think this impacts them all that much. If the footing was really bad, I'd be concerned about one team or the other. But I think the Chiefs are able to shrug this off pretty well. I think this is a case of them really needing to be able to protect Mahomes. This offensive line has been rebuilt since the embarrassment in the Super Bowl a few years ago. In fact, it's been rebuilt almost a couple of times over. We need to make sure guys like Joe Thuney can get out there and provide some resistance to the oncoming Ravens pass rush. It doesn't have a big namer like it has had in the past, like a Terrell Suggs, but Justin Madubuike and some of the other guys have really made the Ravens defensive line formidable. Mike McDonald, it's obviously their defensive coordinator, has been involved in a bunch of head coaching searches. He's up for the Assistant Coach of the Year award, as is Todd Monken, their offensive coordinator. So it's the best built team right now, and they're playing the best as well.
Blewett, it's very different when you look at this Chiefs team as compared to the 5 previous seasons when they have hosted that AFC Championship game. Not only venue, but the Chiefs ranked in the top 10, averaged more than 28 points per game in all 5 of the previous seasons they have appeared in an AFC Championship game. This year, Kansas City, more middle of the pack in terms of scoring offense throughout the regular season, averaging less than 22 points per game. But the Ravens are the best scoring defensive unit in the league, and KC is number 2, just behind Baltimore. When you look at these two teams, when you look at the units across the field, what in your mind is going to dictate the outcome of an AFC Championship game and who goes to Vegas for Super Bowl 58?
I mentioned a little bit of something like this in the NFC game, but I think it's important for the Chiefs to get in the end zone early. We have 2 great kickers here. They're both going to be utilized, so look at those kicking props as well. 1.5 field goal overs for both players. I think those will both come into play for Butker and Tucker. But I think generally what we need to see from the Chiefs is their ability to get in the end zone in the first half. They're not going to be able to go in if it's a 10-9 game and Butker has had to kick 3 field goals in the first half. I just don't think they can afford to do that. I think they need to take advantage of scoring opportunities like they did last week, to be fair. The Bills dominated time of possession 37-23, but the Chiefs still found themselves scoring 27 points and would have scored another touchdown if not for a ridiculous fumble at the goal line. So they were extremely efficient. They're not going to have the opportunity to be quite as prolific this week, I don't anticipate, but their ability to get in the end zone is what dictates it for me. This cannot be them trading field goals, even though I do think there'll be field goal opportunities for both kickers.
2 MVPs going toe-to-toe in the AFC Championship game. That's Patrick Mahomes and it's Lamar Jackson. If we take a look at some of the props here on the board, passing props over 208.5 for Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes at 243.5, and of course the passing touchdowns both listed at 1.5. A little bit different juice here. Jackson at plus 146 to get the 2 touchdown passes, and Mahomes at minus 120. But also, so many times we only take a look at Lamar Jackson's rushing props when it pertains to the quarterback. But Patrick Mahomes been known to spin his wheels a little bit as well at 26.5. Give us some looks here on the 2 quarterbacks from a prop perspective here, Mike.
Oh, the 4 numbers that you just laid out, or excuse me, the 6 numbers that you just laid out, Donnie, I'm going Patrick Mahomes rushing yards. I think he's going to have to scramble and get out there. It doesn't mean I think he puts up Lamar numbers, but I think Mahomes over 26.5 is my favorite number that's on the screen right there. Lamar's rushing yards prop has gone up quite a bit, opening at around 61. and shot all the way up to 66.5. I get it. I think that momentum does make sense because Lamar is going to utilize his legs in this game, perhaps getting away from Chris Jones, who deposited the Bills regularly into Josh Allen's lap last weekend. So that's my favorite of them. Mahomes was remarkably efficient last week, only threw 23 passes, right? We saw him getting into the end zone and being efficient in that way. In terms of Lamar, over 208, that's a pretty low number. And I know that we're thinking, the Ravens will control the clock and it'll be Gus the Bus and Justice Hill. But if Lamar, I would find it hard to believe that the Ravens are going to win this game with Lamar being in the 190s or the 180s. Possible, but I think that number is just a little too low. So Mahomes could win this game if Pacheco's really good by throwing for 235 or 240 and becoming in under that number. I just think that Lamar number is too low. So give me the Mahomes rushing, Lamar over on passing, and passing touchdowns. Yeah, that's a tough one. I'd say Mahomes more likely on the passing touchdowns than Lamar, just because the Ravens are capable of running it close to the goal line.
Both of these defenses rank in the top 10 in terms of defending the pass. KC 18th in terms of defending the run, about 123 yards given up per game throughout this 2023 NFL season. The Buffalo Bills put up a $182 against KC last week, and Josh Allen, like Lamar Jackson, was his team's leading rusher throughout the divisional round. 5 playoff games in Lamar Jackson's NFL career. He has hit the century mark on the ground, including last week against the Texans, 3 of those 5 times. Patrick Mahomes, 5 AFC championship games so far in his career. Sunday will be number 6. At least 275 passing yards in every game. He averages about 306 yards in AFC championship games in his career. 14 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. His favorite target is still Travis Kelce, who has had at least 71 receiving yards in the 2 playoff games this year for KC. He has had at least 75 in all of the 3 previous AFC championship game appearances for Kansas City. But on the other side, Blewett, maybe the biggest availability we still await to see is Mark Andrews, expected to return for the first time since November 16th in the AFC title game on Sunday in the Charm City. 3.5, his receptions prop. 35.5, the receiving yards number for Mark Andrews. What do you expect out of Mark Andrews, Lamar Jackson's favorite target, making his return on Sunday?
So tough to know exactly what's going to happen, but the number is remarkably low, right? If he's out there and he can be Mark Andrews, some semblance of it, then those numbers are all too low. That's the reality. He would be the number 1 target if all of this stuff was pushed to the side. We don't know exactly what his health factors. Is he going to be a decoy? Or have they really relied too heavily on Zay and other players in order for this to be a factor? I think you still look for some Isaiah Likely numbers in this game. 21.5 is his prop. I think his anytime touchdown prop is something to look at as well. But I think you're either all in or all out on Andrews. I think you bet them all or you stay away from it. I'm feeling a little dicey about it. I generally like to see a player do something before I go all in. But it's that time of year, right? People are going to gamble.
Totals coming up here in this game, 44.5 between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. Are we looking over this number, Mike, or under here?
The Ravens team totals have been so consistent that I think we're going to push this one over, but barely. I don't see it being a high scoring game. I think this could be, 27-23, 26-23, something like that. So over the number, but I think that's a pretty good total. I think they've set it really well. I don't think the Ravens get into the 30s like they have been consistently. It is just a factor when considering the number of points that have been scored.
We'll talk about the second half total a little bit later on when we give you the pick 6 for conference championship weekend. The Chiefs, the best second half scoring defense in the league. Baltimore, top 5 as well. Mike Blewett, we appreciate the time. Thank you for being here on this Conference Championship Football Friday. We'll see you this weekend around the SportsGrid network as well.